I'll let you in on a little secret. Reaching your revenue goal won't change your life, but hitting your profit goal, that absolutely will. If you want to build a life first business this year, you need to create more margin, both in your finances and in your schedule. If you're ready to double down on profit generating strategies that actually work so you can work 4-day weeks, go on real vacations, or even take the summers off, you won't want to miss this. In my free masterclass, Double Your Profit While Working Less, you'll learn exactly how to set your business up to scale so you can give yourself a raise, create a clear plan for how to work that dream schedule, and step into your CEO era, the one where you and your business aren't just surviving, but thriving. You can grab this free masterclass at www.jadeboyd.co/Double Your Profit Masterclass or go to the link in the show notes. Now back to the show. And so you're right, like you do have to have the strategy in place, and there are a few things that like the hard work comes up front, right? To be able to make content that is potent like that. But it's so powerful on the back end when you can approach your content with that clarity. Welcome to the Business Edit Podcast, a podcast about redefining productivity for the modern woman in business and finding ways to work smarter, not harder, in business and life. I'm your host, Jade Boyd, an MBA, business minimalist, and productivity coach. I help overwhelmed business owners simplify and scale their service-based businesses by doing less but better. I help my clients create business minimalist strategies and systems that allow them to pursue ambitious goals while working at a human pace. On this podcast, we'll explore simple ways to grow your business with a life-first approach. If you're ready to scale your business, bring order to chaos, ditch the busy work, and spend more time living your life than managing your life, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Business Edit Podcast. Welcome to the show, Rhannon.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am so excited to have this conversation. I feel like this has been a really long time coming. Rhannon and I have been in the same circles for a long time and have done our own little masterminds together. She's someone whose opinions, especially when it comes to business and branding, I have always really valued. And I'm excited to finally bring her to the podcast for you all today. So for those who don't know you, do you want to start by just giving us a little bit more information about who you are, what you do, and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the kind words, Jade. You're so sweet. And I feel the same. Yeah. So obviously my first name is Rhannon. It is one of those names that kind of catches people off guard if they just read it. And so it's not a big deal. It's just like Shannon. And I'm just a mom of 2, almost 3, actually, little kiddos, expecting in October. I am a farm wife here in the Midwest, though I was raised out in Arizona. So a little bit of a transition was necessary when I moved out here, but I absolutely love it. I am really passionate just about helping other women pursue their own passions. I am a firm believer in that women are kind of the world changers that we need, and that we can make such a big impact on, like our families, our communities, the collective just as a whole, because we have such special gifts, especially when we have the right support around us. And so that's kind of my little gist. I guess I worked in branding, product photography, and marketing for about 6 years after college before finally taking the leap into entrepreneurship. I was always interested in entrepreneurship. It was always something that I craved and have been interested in, but I didn't really have a plan on like how that was going to happen. I just had, just enough like gumption, drive, just to kind of leap in and make it work. And of course, the pandemic happened and I didn't have another choice. So I ended up actually being able to replace my salary from my job at the time within the first year of entrepreneurship. And then I doubled it the next. And I was like, whoa, wait a second, maybe I have some skill sets that are actually working, and these are some other things that other business owners, need and could utilize to, continue making an impact. So yeah, over the last 2 years or so, I've been kind of on a journey in healing the effects of physical burnout from being someone who absolutely loves working and finds a lot of fulfillment in that. But I'm now learning, how to be just a better human. For my littles, I'm kind of on a mission to find the type of work that really feels best for me to pour my time and energy into. Because, after you become a mom, you value your time and you value your energy so differently. So yeah, I guess that kind of brings me into what I do these days. I like to say that I offer holistic consulting, strategy support for small businesses. typically through a variety of services. I say that my brand is holistic, though, in that I really do try to look at like the bigger picture for business owners and just who the entrepreneur is as a human so that I can, impact them and support them in a unique way. So yeah, does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are definitely a multi-passionate entrepreneur, but I also feel like you are somebody who you're like that friend that has good taste. And this is not something that I had scripted to ask you, but I feel like we all have that friend, who has like knows when something is good or not good. And they just have that sense for whatever it might be, like outfits, interior design. For you, it's like branding and photography. You just nail the look of things. And you're someone whose opinion on a lot of those things, I'm like, how does this look or how does this feel? I always really value getting your opinion because I know that you just have good taste. And I'm curious, did that come out of your background and like experience with marketing and branding early on? Or is that just the person that you've always been? Because I feel like part of it can be learned and part of it is just like natural gifting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a funny question. And I'll take the compliment. Absolutely. I do think this question leads into, the bigger conversation when we get into talking about human design. But I do think some of that is, an innate natural gift that some people have. There's a part in a human design chart that talks about your strongest sense, and mine is visual. So for some reason, my brain just is very visual. My eyes just kind of do those things. But I also have that kind of strategic brain behind things as kind of like one of my top strengths, on the strengths finder. And so really thinking through like the thought process and the intention behind how things look and why they do look that way, I think is just something that I've always been interested in just from a young age. And so, yeah, realizing that marketing can utilize that and how important that is, especially when it comes to buyer psychology and all of that, is just something that obviously I had to grow and learn about, but it's just complemented, that natural skill set. So you're sweet to say that.
That's really interesting. So today we're talking about doing less by knowing yourself more. And you already kind of dove into like human design is one of the big things that we're going to be talking about today. But speaking to how you help business owners grow their businesses and build their brands by doing things that are really aligned to who they are, their natural giftings, things that make sense for the season that they're in. What are some of the tools that you use when you go through that process with your clients? And then diving deeper into like human design, which we're going to talk more about. Can you give an overview of what human design is specifically?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So this is kind of where things can get into the weeds, right? Because there's all different types of people out there, and there's different types of business owners who have different goals. And I like to say that business owners typically come to me when they're feeling a little bit stuck, or they're feeling disconnected from their brand or their marketing, or it's not landing with people, right? And so typically, in like a connection call, for example, I'm able to kind of say, oh, this is a branding and marketing thing, or maybe this is like a personal development thing. And then kind of decide what tool makes sense for me to kind of utilize with this person alongside supporting them. So yes, of course, human design is one of those that I have personally just really taken a liking to. It's something that I find so incredibly interesting and creative and fun. But I've also used, like the Gallup Strengths Finder with a specific client that it was just so cool to see lots of aha moments there too. And of course, the Enneagram is another tool that lots of people use. It's not something that I have ever felt overly like excited about. So I usually lean towards that human design aspect, but really it all comes down to just having those conversations with people and really like getting to the heart of like, okay, what's going on here? What's the issue? Or how do you want, things to feel, and kind of diving in kind of where that person needs the most help. And so if it's a tool that's the solution, then I'll kind of seek that out and use that. But it just depends on the person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So diving deeper into human design, I had never taken the human design. I don't even know if it's like a quiz or anything. You pulled it for me for this conversation.
Yeah, it's a chart.
Okay, it's a chart.
Yeah.
So can you explain for those who are either new to human design or like me have heard a little bit about it and maybe learned like a little bit but aren't fully sure what it is? Can you explain generally what it is and how you use that when it is the right tool to use with your clients?
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll keep it super general because human design can get really complicated and it's very in depth, and which is great. That's what makes it so unique and makes people feel so seen once they really dive in. But basically, human design is all about, your own energetics and how your energy was designed when you came into the world as your most authentic self. So human design is a tool, it is not a religion. It's designed for you to take kind of what resonates, test out the suggestions, and see what feels right for you. Yes, it's a chart. It is not a quiz. You don't go in and answer questions based off of kind of like who you are at this moment or like what you've recently been through or, things like that, because there's so much, societal and relational conditioning that goes into, who we are in this moment as a human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
The traumas that we experienced, the parenting that we had, all of that. But who are we at our core is kind of what human design is meant to focus on. And what you do is you enter your birth date, your birth time, and your birth location into a app or a chart, whichever one you end up finding. There's paid versions and there's free versions out there. I can link you to one that you can put in the show notes if you want. That is free. And it spits out a chart and it looks a little bit crazy. There's shapes, there's lines, there's numbers, but ultimately there, at first glance, you can see 9 centers, which show up as shapes. You can see 36 channels that show up as like lines around it. And then there are 64 gates, which show up as numbers. And then all of those things have meanings and interpretations. So everyone's charts differ in those different aspects and what parts are defined, undefined, conscious, unconscious. And there's, of course, other aspects too that you can go even further in, especially if you're looking for like a full chart reading from a human design expert. But I specifically like to focus on specific categories that I think translate really well into business and things like that. So generally, when someone dives into human design at first, maybe they've heard about it online or stumbled on it somehow, they'll end up finding out the general information about their type. So, which is your overarching energetic theme. So, for example, Jade, you are a manifesting generator. I'm a generator. And then there are projectors, manifestors, and reflectors. And that's your overarching energetic theme. And then there's a strategy, which is how you are designed to interact with the world. And then there's your authority, which is your personal decision-making process, how you best make decisions that are right for you as a person. So if you really kind of get into it, your strategy is how you interact with the world, and your authority is how you make decisions for yourself. And of course, all of these energetics, they're felt by other people when they're around you, and you can kind of feel them around other people too. And you're not really sure like what's going on here. Why do I enjoy being around this person so much? Or man, me and this person really click and understand each other. There's so much in a chart that can kind of explain why that happens. And if you get really curious, it's really, really cool to look up your kids' charts too. And if you've ever heard a parent say, I can't believe how different my kids are. It's amazing that they both came from us, but they're so different. When you start looking at that as a parent, it makes this even more obvious that it's just such a cool and in-depth thing, and that we're all designed so differently, and that we came to the world with different purposes and different, missions and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of like the very basic of some things that you can kind of expect on a chart. Usually, like I said, people are familiar with little pieces of the puzzle, but there's a lot of depth in various aspects of a chart that make everybody super, super unique. And I'm not an expert on every single aspect, but I can refer people to an expert if they're really interested in a reading.
Yeah. So I do want to dive deeper into how you've used this with clients and specifically how it applies to business owners. But before we go there, I first want to address some of the common misconceptions or misunderstandings you see around human design, because I do think with this isn't technically an assessment, but with things like StrengthsFinder or the Enneagram, I think there's always those initial hesitations on like, can all humans really be put into, like for the Enneagram, 9 boxes? I don't believe that. Some misconceptions that prevent people from even considering or exploring tools like this. So can you start off by just, addressing some of the common things that you hear when people are first introduced to the human design chart?
Yeah, absolutely. I have had, as a business owner who has, briefly weaved it into some of my offerings, I haven't had a ton of pushback with it. I think generally people are super curious. And I think as humans, we innately want to just know ourselves more. So anything that's out there that could potentially help us do that, I think there's a reason we're kind of drawn to things. But I would say, The biggest misconception, I think, with human design or any tool really in general is that it needs to become like this thing that you cling to and, really identify with. And it's important to know that you're still an individual and it doesn't have to be the end all be all. And I think a lot of times this is common is someone will learn, maybe their type strategy and authority in their chart and they'll feel really boxed in by it. And I think that probably happens with maybe like the Enneagram or, some of those other things that we've mentioned. And I think it's really important to realize that like if you are feeling that way by something, you either haven't gone, far enough into how it's actually meant to be interpreted, or there just needs to be like a perspective shift of some sort, to be open to different and new ideas, right? The other thing that I would say is human design is a lot about how you feel in your body. And so those centers, those shapes that I mentioned that are filled in on the chart, which is also called a body graph, it's really encouraging you to look inward and to really like experiment with those things. A good example I like to use is someone saying, follow your gut. Okay. So in the chart, there is a sacral center and not all of us have that defined. And so following your gut and having kind of like that sacral energy and that sacral response is not true for everybody. So I like to make sure that people know it's about what's going on actually inside of you. It's not referring and seeking out things that are outside of you by any means.
Yeah.
So again, it's a tool to kind of get to know yourself. And, I think it's really common with projectors specifically. They'll find out they're a projector and then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, I don't have any energy and like no definition. But listen, Taylor Swift is a projector. And she's not just laying around doing nothing. So I think that is just one of those kind of misunderstandings that people have when they stay on the surface level of things.
Yeah. One other thing that I think specifically with human design and the way that it is designed where you don't answer any questions, it's not about your lived experience. It really is based on the time and date that you were born. As a Christian, even, I don't know how I feel about human design because of that. Like, is our destiny really set when we're born and not? It seems a little bit woo, and I'm always skeptical of things that feel a little bit woo. So I'm curious because I know that you're a Christian as well. How do you look at human design through that lens? And like, as Christians, how can we use a tool like this in ways that is helpful without relying on it or like you said, not overly defining ourselves based on this chart that we get?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a common hesitation for Christians just in general, being unsure about what's holy and what's not holy or what might be frowned upon and what's not, and I totally understand that and empathize with that. One of my favorite things to say about this, you mentioned is the time, that you were born really that big of a deal, or is that when our, fate is sealed? Which I don't believe is true either. But one of my favorite things to say about this is, if God made you, the sun, the moon, and the stars, you better believe that I just trust that the sun, the moon, and the stars each have an effect on us, right? Like we all have these unique thumbprints and the energy in the world is different at every, given moment. And I believe that that has an effect on us when we're born. Yes, of course. But even in the day to day and, you'll hear, maybe like a daycare provider or a mom say, oh, it must be a full moon today because their kids are just acting crazy. Or there's just those energetics. They definitely are more on the woo-woo side of things, but it's also just something that we can be aware of, but also discerning with. So I hear you. I totally understand why someone might hesitate with something like this, but we do have to use our own discernment and our own inner compass to kind of decide what's aligned for us as individuals. I wrestled with this too right away, especially knowing that I wanted to weave it a little bit into my business and what I do. And so it was going to be very public that I was interested in it. Right. And I think the key thing to focus on is realizing that you're not idolizing any person in human design. It's genuinely meant to help you get to the core of who you were sent to this earth as before all of that conditioning that we've been exposed to, all of that worldly distraction. So I think that there can be a lot of wins in it, but also if it doesn't feel safe for you, then maybe it's not meant for you. And I think that that's okay too. To add to this conversation too, I remember back when I first started spiritual direction with Jade, who I know you are familiar with and whom you've had on the podcast, we all adore. I hesitated for so long to do that with her, worrying because I heard other Christians, frowning upon it, and handles that conversation with so much grace, which I just think that in some way there will always be some who continuously seek out reasons to out-holy the other. But again, it's about really listening to that still small voice that, we all have, and see if something feels aligned for you. And you can invite God into navigating what tools you utilize. You just have to trust yourself in that.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. And I think that's really helpful to hear, that it is a tool just like anything else, and how you use it is up to you. Like you said, we all have discernment. Everybody's comfort levels are different. Everybody's philosophies, whether they call themselves Christian or not, like any religion has different levels of belief and differing opinions outside of like the core doctrines of any religion. So I think that's really helpful right off the bat, because I think if you have never seen your human design, one, you don't know if it could be helpful or not, or if you're going to resonate it with it or not. And also, it's not a replacement for anything else. It's just a tool that you can use in whatever way is actually helpful. So speaking of using human design, once you do have your chart, how can small business owners actually use this human design chart to find more clarity? Like, we're talking about doing less. When we know ourselves better, it does give us more clarity and help us make better decisions. So specifically when we're building personal brands as service providers and small business owners, how can our chart help us get that clarity?
Yeah, I love this stuff. This is what I love diving into. So first, when you first pull your chart, if you're going to go pull a free chart or grab an app or something to do that with, it might feel like a lot right away. And it might feel really hard to interpret and apply on your own. So I would encourage you to seek someone out who you can get that support from if it's something you're interested in. But at the end of the day, I have used my human design chart to make more aligned decisions, just like you talked about, really listening and acknowledging my sacral rather than overthinking and overanalyzing, which happens quite often for me personally. And Jade, you know this as a colleague. And that's due to my undefined head center, which you have a defined one. So we can talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, so there's different ways that we can use it just in our decision making and strengthening that skill set of like asking, okay, how does this decision feel in my body? And knowing where you're supposed to be feeling that at based on your design, and kind of developing that self-trust within yourself. And I would say like one big example for relying on this would be when I decided to sell my motherhood photography business and double down on a new niche. And you might relate to this, Jade, because you used to do brand photography and then you switched gears as well. So when I had originally proposed this idea to myself, my sacral was like lit up, like screaming, yes, this is the right move, and it's like that excitement in my core that I could feel. And so I knew it was the right decision. So that example has a lot to do with understanding and experiencing my authority as a generator. But when you dive deeper than the basics, there's even specific gates within a chart that you can look at that specifically impact how you interpret and hone in on your personal brand. For example, we could look at like the conscious sun gate, which can correlate to your energetic purpose. So then if you are feeling really aligned in your business and you're living out your purpose and that's what you've designed your business around, it can feel really, really empowering to know that, one, of course. But I'll give you an example like mine. My conscious sun gate is gate 36. And in brief terms, that has a lot to do with compassion and helping others transform. And I apply that to what it is that I do by helping others like really see the depth in their experiences. So much of your brand and your message come from your experiences, from your stories, from your heart about the topic. And it can be so beneficial to work with someone who can show you how to piece those puzzle pieces together in a way that lands with potential clients, right? So if you really think about how cool it could be to incorporate something so unique to you like that into your brand strategy, rather than just Googling brand values and picking, a random word from a list of options that sound good, it could feel so much more aligned to take that very unique to you angle when you approach your marketing and your message and your content creation. So for me, with that sun gate, if I want my content to feel compassionate, I can make super intentional decisions so that it comes across that way when someone does view it, instead of just, following a trend or doing what I think everyone else is doing. I can really focus on how I'm making people feel, right? And when things feel aligned like that for you, it's received as authentic. It's not forced. It's not gimmicky. It becomes more magnetic, right? Your conscious sun, Jade, is gate 5, and it has a lot to do with being attuned to unique patterns and rhythms that offer deep support. So it's really interesting with your chart. We won't go too into depth with it, but you have clearly, found and leaned into that without even realizing it, but you are helping people with those things. And we can talk a little bit more about some of your centers that complement that as well. But that's just
So
one example.
interesting.
That's just one example. And there's some other gates that I like to look at specifically that are just like that conscious sun gate. And they really highlight what you naturally bring to the table, right? It's that energy that's felt from you. And you can kind of learn how to play with that and just stop mimicking what you think works best based on who you see doing really well.
Yeah. Okay. There's so much to dig into here. But
Yes.
so I love how you talked about how human design it connects to your personal brand and it connects to
Yeah.
what you're emphasizing and how you're showing up in your business, regardless
Yep.
of your niche. Like, it doesn't mean that you're changing what you're doing as a business owner. It's just changing the way that you show up or the way that you do your work. And I love how any assessment, but I love how you explained how human design can specifically do this to us. Oftentimes assessments can just give us the words to say what we already know is true. Like, I'm sure you already knew that you're compassionate and you were very
Yeah.
compassionate with your clients. And we've talked about this before, I feel like almost
Yeah.
to a fault. Like, you love
Yes.
giving and serving. And so it's not like it's something that you hadn't known before, but when you see it in
Right.
assessment and when you see it laid out, it helps you make decisions on like, okay, this is a strength. This is something that I bring to the table in a unique way that nobody else can. How can I leverage that and incorporate that in a way that is helpful? And so I love what you said
Exactly.
about instead of Googling, like, how do I come up with brand values? It gives you a starting point. So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily telling you something that you don't already know, but it is helpful to
Mhm.
have that narrowed down on paper to just have somewhere to start. And
Yeah,
that in itself
absolutely.
definitely helps us do less if we're not playing the Googling game of like, how do I build a personal brand? It's overwhelming. But can you speak to
Yes.
like, how else can human design help us do less as business owners?
Yeah. Oh man. How can it help us do less? So at first, it might feel like it makes you do more because you have to learn, which of course takes time. But if you work with someone who already has it learned and just trust their process, that of course will expedite that. But let's see, how can it help us do less? When it comes to human design or any tool, really, we can go down those rabbit holes and try to uncover every last bit of information before actually utilizing it. But I think the best way for it to help you do less is to really find an understanding of your strategy and your authority first so that you can like start feeling and trusting within your own body and stop seeking out like that blanket advice or those free tips and
Yeah.
tricks. Really start that with that self-trust so you can stop saying yes to things that aren't aligned and consuming all of that content that is maybe not even for you and your unique energy and will actually never work for who you are because you're not perceived in the same way as that other person is. How many trainings have people invested in and tried to implement? And it's just like, it feels
Yes.
like there's such resistance with it, right? And there's a reason for that. They're not all meant for your unique energy.
Sadly, is something that I think, especially for new business owners, it took me so long to actually believe that the
Yeah.
answers are not out there somewhere. Like, you can actually look internally and find
Mm,
ways to build your business, ways that are actually more helpful and will be easier than trying to copy and paste
yes.
somebody else's strategy that might have worked really, really well for them. But I think
Yeah.
often, I mean, maybe we never outgrow this as business owners, but we're looking for the perfect solution or that answer, or the secret that somebody must have. Like, there's no way it could be within me. That's just crazy. So I want
Right.
to emphasize
Right.
that because that's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, like that will always be true. But I think when you have the right support in place and you have people around you that can say, hey, well, how does that decision feel for you? And you can kind of get that third party that's saying, like, do a gut check really quick, or what's your brain telling you with your defined crown? You have these specific ideas. And so, yes, let's go with that. Don't take my idea, take yours, and run with it. Things like that. And I would say, too, that with your defined centers and your undefined centers, like you're naturally attracting certain types of people too. And so we can do less by just realizing who it is we're for, right?
Mm.
And what they need from us and what they're seeking out from us naturally. And so it just takes a little bit of that force away, I would say. And I think things can just happen a lot naturally. And you can have that self-trust again, I think is what it comes down to.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. So, as a brand strategist, you obviously help your clients build brands that feel aligned to them, personal to them. But you also have this term called potent content, which I don't know if this is like an official thing that you intentionally say, but whenever I think of potent, I think of you. And it is like the way that you help your clients and even have helped me brainstorm, like, how do I say this in a way that does feel potent? It's not diluted or overused or the
Mm.
same as everybody else's brand in this certain niche. How do you help your clients do that? And how can we as business owners create more potent content that doesn't feel diluted and overused?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. Oh, that's so funny that you use that word potent and relate it to me. I love that. I'll coin that one. It's so funny how quickly a brand conversation overlaps into a marketing conversation, right? And
Yep.
so this is something that I actually hope to pour more of my energy into helping others with these days. But I think to answer the question, we have to quickly note that producing content is part of a marketing strategy. And of course, you know that the style, the energy, and the visuals of that content has a lot more to do with the brand strategy, right? So the two really do have to tango in order for things to be potent, if you will. So we can do this. We can be more potent by number one, getting super familiar with our brand, our message, and our ideal clients. And even better than that, actually falling in love with each of those. Like really, really, it feels good. It feels like me. It
Mhm.
feels like second nature. You know your people, right? And what they need to hear. And then, and only then, do we actually want to put time into creating with intention. And so to do that, to create with intention, you can really start asking yourself, what is the purpose of this specific piece of content? What stage of my marketing funnel is this intended for? Where am I at in business? Am I trying to grow? Am I trying to gain an audience right now? Am I trying to convert leads? Or are you in a place where you're looking to just nurture your current audience right now? And knowing the answers to those questions before you create can really help guide the decisions that go into creating content. So that's what I would say to start with, is really knowing, okay, what am I doing and why? What's the outcome I want? But true potency comes from, your viewer or your follower or your listener or your subscriber really feeling seen, understood, and served. At the end of the day, we just need to dive a little bit deeper than the surface level stuff so that we can realize how our people are feeling, why they feel that way, know what they are experiencing, where our brand fits into the bigger picture for them amongst all of those things, right?
Mhm.
So once we understand those things, we can really break down these bigger concepts that we now know into these smaller, digestible, intriguing, and share worthy moments that I personally believe make your content more potent.
Yeah. 100%. And I think if we're looking at two ends of the spectrum here, I'm just imagining like what is the most diluted piece of content I can imagine. And it's like
Mm.
a Canva template that's highly recognizable. And it's a quote from somebody who's not even in their business. And like the caption that's just hearts or something like that, like totally diluted. And we scroll past those versus the really potent piece of content where you see it and you're immediately like, I know what brand this is. I know what person is
Mm.
posting this. It's recognizable and it's relatable. And you feel like they are speaking directly to you. Those two
Yeah.
different types of content might take the exact same amount of time to create, but they are wildly different when it comes to what they are actually going to do to help you grow your business. And so you're right, like you
Right.
do have to have the strategy in place. And there are a few things that like the hard work comes up front, right? To be able to make
Yeah.
content that is potent like that. But it's so powerful on the back end when you can approach your content with that clarity. And it also comes down to, I mean, along with human design, tying this back to knowing yourself. I have definitely had points in my business where I felt like I am just showing up as a stereotypical business coach or productivity coach and like posting things or like teaching things that I think I should be talking about, but it doesn't
Mm.
feel like me. And I think we can continually get ourselves into those ruts, even if we know the things, right? We know what we
Yeah.
should be doing. We know the questions we should be checking. We know that our gut is saying that something is off. But it is really easy to fall into those ruts where you are just like creating content just to create and not leaning
Mm.
into your unique giftings and your unique voice. So, have you ever experienced that in your own business, or do you work with clients who are kind of in that phase where, like, I might even have that clarity? I'm just not using it
doing
to the
it.
best of my ability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is the Achilles heel of all business owners that have to be a part of the content creation process. And a lot of times, as small business owners, we have to be a part of that process. It's absolutely crucial, especially as a personal brand, a service provider. You just have to be a part of it. I have, of course, a ton of thoughts on that itself, but I think what happens is we get into this hole where we are just in that mode of creating and going through the motions and things like that, that we forget to take a step back a lot of times. Because again, social media, specifically when we're talking about content for social, you get really sucked in, right? And you're also inundated with all of this other stuff while you're on there. And it is so hard to put the blinders on and just do what you know is the right thing to do. And, not compete or not mirror image something or not hop on that trend that looks so exciting. It can be so hard to put those blinders on. But I will say, even with the human design aspect in mind, like really knowing your energy type and like what types of content are going to feel more easeful for you so that you aren't putting a ton of time into things that don't excite you. Do you like to use graphics and type out templates and things like that? Or does that feel draining for you? And could showing up live be more aligned for you? And really thinking through your marketing strategy once you kind of know those things about yourself as well. So yes, of course, this has happened to me and it consistently happens for me because as an emotional generator, my authority is emotional because I have a defined solar plexus. I ride a wave of inconsistency in emotion. And I feel a lot, And so now that I know that about myself, I can give myself so much more grace in that consistency. And it's something that I think is really, really huge for some people to realize. And it's interesting, Jade, because in your chart, you are also an emotional authority, but you are a manifesting generator and you have a defined head, which I think contributes a lot to the way that you are able to be consistent because systems come so easily for you. And so without those, could you imagine with what your business would be like if you just woke up and you're like, I should post something, I should create content? You would never do that, right? Because you are built a certain way. But for someone who does have that undefined crown or head, those systems don't come as easily and as naturally. So yeah. And I would naturally be attracted to someone like you because you do have that defined. So those centers are so huge to know about and to take advantage of.
I love how you pointed out that knowing yourself gives you the opportunity to just have more grace for yourself, because I do think, especially when I work with a lot of overwhelmed business owners who are frustrated, feeling like they're working really hard or frustrated with themselves for not doing what they think they should, quote unquote, should be doing. And it's easy when you're in that season to feel like this is just who I am. I'm lazy. I'm never going to get anything done. When in reality, if again, you just have the words and the proof to show that like, no, this is just the way that I operate. There's rhythms. It's not this season is forever. It's going to change. I can remember last season when I was riding the wave and it looked differently. And I do think that knowing those things about yourself, and again, just having the words to communicate what that actually is to ourselves and to other people, just eliminates that, not overwhelm, but almost like self-deprecating behavior where we're talking negatively to ourselves, when some of the things that we put ourselves down for might in fact be our greatest strengths if we're utilizing them in a way that is helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really do think it just takes that third party support. I think I firmly believe in coaching and consulting and even just phoning a colleague, a friend, always having that in your kind of back pocket, because it's such a huge thing to have that other perspective, because it's so easy to get inside your head and forget to look inward and to be bogged down by a lot of that stuff that we're surrounded by.
Yeah. I also want to tie the conversation back. This was a while ago, but you also mentioned that you've recently gone through burnout and have kind of been changing the way that you're doing business and have made a lot of changes overall to your business and to your life as you're attempting to like come back to business and do things differently. So I would really love to just talk through some of the things that have helped in that season. What has changed since you recognize that, oh, I'm actually burnt out, and what that journey has looked like? Because I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are feeling like they are beginning to get burnt out, or they're actually in the depth of burnout. And that can be a really hard place to be. as a business owner. And it can be really easy to want to quit business in that season when in reality it takes a long time to dig yourself out of burnout once you're in it. It's not something that a vacation can fix or anything like that, sadly.
No.
So I would love for you to speak more to your experience with that.
Oh, I have so much to say on this topic. Like it's almost like got to be its own episode.
You'll have to have you back for the full thing.
Right. It's so layered. There's so much depth to the reasons that people burn out. Right. And I think it's also just a term that is kind of thrown around super easily. I was actually diagnosed with adrenal burnout. I went to the hospital. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Of course, traditional medicine doesn't recognize that as something that is a real condition. But I had to learn how to take care of myself physically, of course. And as someone who loves to work and who has always thrived off of the positive feedback and the dopamine hits and the rush of receiving awesome feedback from a client or from a boss even, or whatever it is that gives you kind of that really amazing feeling about yourself. I thrived on that for so long that I would even prioritize getting that over getting nutrition, over getting in movement. And that also ties into, of course, the way that I was raised, your relationship and the way that you were parented. Those things all play a role into how we act as adults, right? And the things that we do. So I had to unlearn a lot of things. I had to realize where I needed more help, where I needed more nurturance, how to nurture myself just in general. But in business, I think it always comes back to brand strategy, truly, because you have to know why you're there, why you're doing it, what the impact is that you want to make. Like, what's the vision? What's the purpose? What is it that you actually want to do? I could say that I want to help people transform their lives, but there's so many different ways to do that, right? So really knowing what it is that you want to do can help you come back to kind of the core of why you started in the first place. And if you can take a step back and give yourself that space, that time to be still, you can really start reflecting and seeing things differently and allowing your life to kind of come first and reflecting on like, okay, how can I now fit this business in to make this work? Which is something that I've had to do now a couple different times and adjust accordingly, right? And trusting kind of that process, and of course seeking out the support that helps you make that happen. But yeah, it can be really scary to take a step back and say, okay, I need to push pause. This isn't working right now. I'm loving it. I feel great. I love all of the dopamine, but it's not working with my lifestyle. I know I can't keep this up. So what's going to change? Let's go back to the drawing board. What are the basics? What can I do? What's the most important things, and then kind of turning those blinders on to everything else and realizing that just because you step back doesn't mean that all of a sudden your skill sets are gone or that you're not valuable anymore. You can come back and be even more valuable because of the perspective that you've been able to gain by giving yourself that space.
So when you did take that step back, do you feel like you got more clarity on why you were growing your business? Do you think that you were pursuing the wrong why as a business owner? Or do you feel like it was just getting lost going through the motions day to day?
I think what happened with me personally is I never really had a huge why at first. For me, at first, it was about survival, right? And proving that I could do it. And I think that might be the case for anybody who jumps in headfirst into entrepreneurship and maybe doesn't like slowly step into it, which I think there's pros and cons to both approaches. But sometimes you just hit the ground running and you forget that you have to like stop and take a drink of water. And so for me, I think I didn't realize like what it is that I wanted and how I wanted it to feel in my body. And it was that concept just in general was something that I had to learn through various things, the spiritual direction, personal development, growth as a parent, reparenting myself, all of those things, really tuning into how that's supposed to feel in your body, I think is kind of what made me want to take a step back. But I was definitely pursuing just survival and doing what I thought I needed to do and pursuing those dopamine hits. But now I know so potently, there's that word again, that I'm here to help other women and use my skill sets, my natural gifts that aren't forced whatsoever to help them succeed and to help them change and make the impact that they want to make. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you were talking about like taking that step back and finding your why, it reminded me, I recently learned that there is an official diagnosis for burnout, actually, according to the World Health Organization. But I would agree, it's not commonly talked about, or I don't hear a lot of people being diagnosed with burnout. But one of the symptoms that they look for is, just reading this off of their website, is increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, which I think is so common for entrepreneurs when they get to that place where they are just like grinding and lose sight of like, why am I actually doing this? It can lead you to be very cynical about your business and about your clients and very resentful. And that is a surefire sign that you are on your way to burnout. And I've felt that at times in my own business, feeling like, why am I doing this again? And especially, maybe this relates to my human design. You tell me if this is in your chart, but I can get very strategic and analytical about my business and do the thing that makes sense on paper. I can go there very easily. And when that's disconnected from my why for my business, I can easily get cynical of like, oh, I'm just annoyed that I have to show up and record this podcast episode, because I'm just doing it to check off a box and get content out there instead of connecting it back to like, no, today I am showing up to help women who are overwhelmed bring order to chaos in their lives. That feels so much more energizing and exciting. And it's not even that you do anything differently. It's that you're showing up with intention and reminding yourself of why you're there.
Yeah, it's that mindset piece. And I think as women, just in general, we're raised to put other people first constantly. And so a lot of times if we aren't taking care of ourselves, even in our personal lives or, as moms, that burnout effect can happen so much quicker, and it's coming from different angles and for different reasons. And so, yeah, it's so important to, take care of yourself first and really make sure that it's fulfilling you.
So we're definitely going to have to come back and do a deep dive on burnout. We could definitely talk about that for a lot longer. But I also wanted to ask you one last question. As a brand strategist, and like I said, you are just somebody who has phenomenal taste. You know what's good. I'm curious what your number one branding pet peeve is.
Oh, this is funny. I have a few, of course, but I think the one that makes the most sense to talk about here is that my pet peeve is that it's super common for people to assume that branding means logo and graphic design. Like, yes, visuals are a part of it, but really those are the very last things that business owners need to focus on. As long as you aren't repelling people with eyesore visuals, I think that your brand is way more about how you make other people feel and what they would say about you or your business when you're not around. And to me, those things are far more memorable and shareable than a brand mark or like a trendy color palette. A visual brand package is really a fun cherry on top of a business that finally feels good about what it stands for, who it serves, what impact it wants to make. And that's what I love helping people realize and find clarity on, so that then they can go seek that out. Because, there's so much change and growth that happens within the first few years of business. You've experienced it yourself, Jade. We gain insight and experience into what we enjoy, who we benefit, what our real skill sets are. And it would be such a shame to invest in graphics and logos that aren't going to truly reflect this person, or their goals in a year's time. And I have made that mistake myself. So I would say that's my biggest pet peeve, is the strategy is so much more important than the visuals. And I think people like to go to the visuals first because it's the fun, shiny part, and it doesn't make them dive deep into, all of those complicated 100%. Things.
Yeah, I love that. I think we've talked about this before, or I probably mentioned it on the podcast too, but I always think of Target when I think about brand versus branding, because they have the worst branding ever. Like, it doesn't make sense at all to me. Like, the name, the logo, it's very corporate. When I think about how I feel walking into Target, it's very different. Like, that's the brand. It's the special place. It's the special experience. The branding itself, I could lose. They could do a rebrand and it would make me very happy. But
it's not making you not go in because you don't love that red circle, right?
Yeah.
And
like you said,
so it's the cherry for people to realize.
Yep. 100%. So for those who want to dive deeper into your world and know more about human design and brand strategy and all the things that you have to offer, where can they find you after the show?
Yeah, so I keep things super casual and candid over on Instagram. You can always hop into my DMs just to chat. I'm over at rannonyanke.co. So RHANNONJANKE.co. I really do love connecting in the DMs and just having great conversations with other business owners. And my website is the same at rannonyanke.co. So I will also send you a link, Jade, to put a free human design chart website that you can pull a chart from so that people can do that on bodygraph.io.
Perfect. Awesome. We'll have all of that linked in the show notes too. So thank you so much again, Rhannon. This is great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Edit podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, tagging me at jadeboyd.co. I'm on a mission to empower a new generation of women to become the types of wives, moms, and business owners that they've always wanted to be. Because empowered women change their families and communities for the better, and this is how we'll change the world. Sharing your takeaways from this episode on Instagram will help more women in business discover helpful episodes and level up in life and business each week. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the tools and resources mentioned in today's episode, because good ideas don't grow businesses. Action does. I'll see you next time on the Business Edit podcast. The number of women burning out is at an all-time high right now, and I'm on a mission to change that. If you're a service provider who's feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and underpaid, don't let another year go by staying stuck. The Business Edit is a 12-month group coaching program that helps you declutter your business from top to bottom so that you can have shorter to-do lists, a clear strategy to scale, and know exactly what to focus on each week to drive results in your business. You'll end the year with the business that you've been dreaming of building, one that gives you your life back and pays you more than you ever made before. In the program, you'll follow my signature 5-step method for scaling your service-based business. You'll get business minimalist strategy, marketing, systems, and productivity roadmaps that are simple to understand and easy to implement. Plus, 12 months of customized one-on-one coaching to help you every step of the way. Join me inside the Business Edit at www.jadeboyd.co/coaching and get my step-by-step blueprint with everything you need to build your dream business in 2024. Now back to the show.